Hello and welcome to the Commander's Forge podcast. I am your host, Andrew Bentley, and on today's episode, I'm going to take a look at Commander Legends spoilers that I find exciting. But before we jump in, just a quick reminder that the Commander's Forge is an outlet for me to talk about Commander in ways that I enjoy it. Now, jumping in, I want to start with Kamahl, Heart of Krosa. He is a 5/5 legendary human druid for 6 green. With the ability, at the beginning of combat on your turn, creatures you control get +3/+3 and gain trample until end of turn. That's a repeatable overrun. He also says, for 1 and a green, until end of turn, target land you control becomes a 1/1 elemental creature with vigilance, indestructible, and haste. It's still a land, and he has partner. I don't really see where I would use him as a partner, but the first place my mind went when I saw him was Goreclaw, Terror of Kelsisma. Not only does she make him costless, but she wants big creatures on the board, and he helps facilitate that with his pump. I think the other place where I could see him is in a lands deck that is trying to tap mana for more than it would normally produce and then untap them. And I could see that. Part of the problem with putting him in the lead, I think, is I don't know what to partner him with. But if I had to choose, I would probably want him to be paired with somebody with red and possibly white. So I'd probably go with a Bruse Taro build. That way you can lean into like Naya landfall shenanigans. And that's probably how I would use it. Alright, next I'm going to shift over to white for the Keeper of the Accord, which is a 3/4 human soldier for 3 and a white. Now, the Keeper has a solid body being a 3/4, and also has 2 relevant types being a human and a soldier. But it also has an ability that says at the beginning of each opponent's end step, if that player controls more creatures than you, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. This means that it actually helps you keep up if you're behind, which is great for white. And to further that point, it also says at the beginning of each opponent's end step, if that player controls more lands than you, you may search your library for a basic plains card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. Which again helps if you're behind, and in mono white, it helps you keep up when all of the other decks at the table are ramping. Now, does this fix all of the problems with mono white inherently? No. But it's definitely a step in the correct direction. Alright, and moving right along, next we move to black with Sengir, the Dark Baron. He is a 4/4 vampire noble for 4 black. He has flying, and whenever another creature dies, put 2 +1/+1 counters on Sengir, the Dark Baron. Whenever another player loses the game, you gain life equal to that player's life total as the turn began, and partner. Now, my first thought looking at this is actually Coil from the Guardian Project podcast, taking this and Tevashsat, Doom of Fools, to truly prove that mono black is the best color combination in Magic the Gathering. That said, Tevashsat, Doom of Fools, is a planeswalker that enters with 4 loyalty for 4 and a black. He has a +2 that says create 2 0/1 black Thrall creature tokens, a +1 that says you may sacrifice another creature or planeswalker. If you do, draw 2 cards. Then draw an additional card if the sacrifice permanent was a commander. And at -10, he has gain control of all commanders. Put all commanders from the command zone onto the battlefield under your control. Tevashsat, Doom of Fools can be your commander and has partner. That combination could lead you down some kind of mono black sacrifice Voltron deck where you're trying to control the board and just grow the Baron and then one-shot somebody. Or you could build a mono black control deck where you're just trying to control what creatures are on the board and again use the Baron as a finisher because he doesn't care if your creatures die. He gets the counter if any creature dies. It would be a disservice if I didn't mention vampire decks. There's absolutely no reason to not slot him into the 99 of any vampire commanders. Alright, and now I'm going to take a departure from monocolors to talk about Yurlok of Scorched Thrash. He is a 4/4 Viacino Shaman for 1, a black, a red, and a green, with Vigilance, and a player losing unspent mana causes that player to lose that much life. Now, mana burn was before my time, but I've definitely heard stories about it. And I definitely want to build this deck. But on top of his ability, he also has 1 and tap. Each player adds black, red, green. Each player. I really see this deck as a group slug, slow everybody down, just deal a bunch of damage type deck. Just run all your damage doublers, your damage triplers, all the things that give everybody all the mana, and watch them all just die. It's going to be great. Or the other way I can see this going is some kind of instant or flash, do things at the end step of other people's turns type deck. You know, the type of deck that's going to run basically everything off of Vedalken Orrery. Yeah, good times. Now, shifting from Jund to Orzhov, we have Lysa, Shroud of Dusk. She is a 5/5 angel for 2 white, white, black. She says, rather than pay 2 for each previous time you've cast the spell from the command zone this game, pay 2 life that many times. Which feeds into something I've said about black, kind of jokingly, forever. Is that black can do anything at a higher cost or the cost of life. But continuing on, she also has flying and lifelink, and whenever a player casts a spell, they lose 2 life. I can see this either at the head of or in the 99 of a life gain control deck where you're padding your life total and just simultaneously trying to take your opponents down. Or I can see like an Orzhov punishment deck where you're just everything you're doing is trying to punish your opponents for casting cards. But besides all of that, she is the one character I'm most excited for because of her lore. She is the sister to Sigarda, Gisela, and Bruna from Innistrad. Alright, and next I'm going to shift over to Gruul with Tuya Bearclaw. She is a 2/2 human warrior for 1 red-green. She says whenever she attacks, she gets +X/+X till end of turn, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. I really like how she becomes a secondary threat to back up a first threat. She just needs trample or double strike or flying to really push her into actually being a threat. And I feel like that's easy enough given the colors she's in. That said, if I did end up building this deck, I probably would go more dragons than bears. Because then you get stuff like Atarka or Dragonlord Atarka. Just big beat sticks. Which anybody who knows me knows that is one of my preferred ways to play. Or given the fact that it's a cheap warrior, it might slot into an Najeela deck. I don't know, that's kind of a 50-50 toss for me. Because my Najeela deck focuses more on low to the ground, fast, aggressive creatures, and less on large, smashy creatures, but you never know. There are a couple in there, but I digress. Moving along to a colorless card, because I have a trio to talk about afterwards, is Phyrexian Triniform, which is a 9/9 golem for 9 generic mana. It says when Phyrexian Triniform dies, create 3 3/3 colorless golem artifact creature tokens. That makes me really want to run it in like a populate or token deck. But I also see it in other places like a Purphoros deck or decks running Warstorm Surge or Impact Tremors. But it gets better. It has Encore 12. What that means is you can pay 12 and exile it from your graveyard, and for each opponent you create a token copy that attacks that opponent this turn of Fable, gives them haste, and you sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step. You can only do this as a sorcery, but in those decks I was just talking about, you're making 3 tokens that are 9/9s. Then on top of that, when they die, they each make 3 3/3s, which is insane. Especially with anything that's going to double your tokens, like Anointed Procession or Parallel Lives, Doubling Season, any of those. And this just goes insane. But that's enough about that. Next, I'm going to move into 3 cards that have one thing in common. They're all pirates. They are Ghost of Ramirez de Pietro, Portraiser, and Zara Renegade Recruiter. And starting with the Ghost of Ramirez de Pietro, he is a 2/3 spirit pirate for 2 and a blue. And he says, Ghost of Ramirez de Pietro can't be blocked by creatures with toughness 3 or greater, which is a nice pseudo-evasion. Next, he says, whenever Ghost of Ramirez de Pietro deals combat damage to a player, choose up to 1 target card in a graveyard that was discarded or put there from a library this turn, put that card into its owner's hand. Which, honestly, I can see it in like a Self-Mill or maybe a Madness deck. And he also has Partner. I like the fact that he can't be blocked by creatures with toughness 3 or greater. Sure, it's not flying, but sometimes it gets around things. His second ability, it could be used politically, I guess. But I still think a Self-Mill deck is probably where this is leaning. But other than that, I like the fact that they brought him back. But with the next one, I have a little more to say. Portraiser is a 4/4 orc pirate for 3 red. And he says, whenever Portraiser deals combat damage to a player, untap each creature you control. After this combat phase, there's an additional combat phase. It also says, Portraiser can't attack a player it has already attacked this turn. So all this really needs is a way to get through, trample, flying, something along those lines. And yeah, I think that's fine. But where this is really going to shine is with the Helm of the Host. Much like the combo that Helm of the Host has with Godo, Bandit, Warlord, this can lead to infinite combos as long as the copy can get through, resetting the combat, making another one, and rinsing and repeating. Either way, I believe he's going to be a fine addition to any pirate deck. And by any pirate deck, I basically mean Admiral Beckett Brass. Alright, and that brings me to the third pirate I would like to talk about, Zara Renegade Recruiter, which is a 4/3 human pirate for 3 blue-red. She has flying, and whenever Zara Renegade Recruiter attacks, look at defending player's hand. You may put a creature card from it onto the battlefield. under your control, tap then attacking that player or a planeswalker they control. Return that creature to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. And yes, I understand that with webcam Magic, this isn't going to be the greatest to play, but when I get a chance to play with my meta in person, I will enjoy this very much. I don't know if I'm going to build her as a deck, but if I did, I would probably make sure to add sack outlets like Ashnod's Altar or anything along the lines of sack a creature, draw a card, because I don't want to give their creatures back. But who knows, maybe she becomes the new head of Blue-Red Pirates, where Admiral Beckett Brass is the head of Grixis Pirates. It could happen. I might build that deck. I'm probably going to build that deck. Yeah, why not? Alright. And I'm going to round out my list with a card that I wasn't going to talk about until I read its flavor text. So the only reason I am including it is because of its flavor text. That is Horizon Stone, which is a 5-mana artifact that says if you would lose unspent mana, that mana becomes colorless instead. Which is the ability on Kruphix, God of Horizons. And the flavor text references him. Kruphix once dreamed that he traveled beyond the edge of the world to an unfamiliar land. Curious, he picked up a rock and awoke to find it had followed him from the dream into reality. And what does that sound like? Just listen to this part one more time. Dreamed that he traveled beyond the edge of the world to an unfamiliar land. What else does that? Planeswalkers. Is Kruphix going to become a Planeswalker? Honestly, I doubt it, but it's a decent talking point. And now it's time for all the normal YouTube stuff. If you enjoyed it, consider subscribing, hit that like button, hit the bell for notifications, and I will see you next time. That brings us to the end of the podcast. I would like to thank Nate and Erica Jacobs for designing my logo, and Cody Malpe and Ian Foss for allowing me to use a sample of music from their band The Crypt. The podcast can be found on YouTube by searching Commander's Forge. The podcast is Commander's Forge, that is CMDR_Forge on Twitter. I can be found on Twitter at BentzMr, that is BENTZMR. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time, and until then, here's to fun games and sick plays.